So recently I was asked, can astrology help kids to decide what course or classes to take at school? So let me give you some context for how this happens. So I was in a meeting with a man who works with like tuition agencies here in Singapore where I live. And for context, when I was young and when I was in school, what I remembered was that about 15 or 16 years old, you kind of had to decide if you were going to like a more academic sort of junior college, or if you wanted to go to a polytechnic where you might pick up more sort of like professional type skills. And so, of course, it's a huge pressure for somebody who is essentially a teenager to decide what you were going to study next. And it's a huge decision because most of us have kind of figured out that the decision that you make at 15 or 16 years old can actually determine what career you are in for the rest of your life. And so, which is why, it's like no pressure there, right? I mean, you're 16 years old and you're kind of deciding your life. So I understood when this man came and asked me, can astrology help? And so I was very intrigued. And I said, well, if we're dealing with 15, 16-year-olds, and I remember him saying that, no, actually, you're not dealing with 15, 16-year-olds. You're dealing with 12-year-olds. And I was shocked. I was like, why is that? So when he explained to me, now in Singapore, there's an exam that kids take called the PSLE. And after you take this exam, depending on how well you've done or how well you didn't do, you basically decide where you were going to go, whether you were going to take a vocational education, like an academic education, if you're going to be in the sports school, the art school. And I'm like, whoa, that's a major decision for a 12-year-old to make. Which is why today I want to really explore, can astrology help? And I'm going to give you the short answer here. It's that it kind of maybe could, but it may surprise you, but that I would say this, but I don't recommend it. And I'm going to explain why. So in this video, I will explain first of all the superficial reasons and the practical reasons why I don't think astrology is a good thing to sort of apply in this particular way, but I'm also going to explore sort of like a deeper, and if you ask me, a kind of more troubling reason why I don't recommend it. But I'm also going to end off with telling you how I think that if we change a few parameters, I think astrology is going to be perfect and very useful for helping people make that decision. So I think I'm going to start off with refining the question to begin with first, because I don't think the real outcome that we're aiming for is to help the child to choose a course of study, because let's face it, the course of study isn't important. But rather that the end objective is, the question is, can we use astrology to help this child to make good early decisions so that it prepares the child for a career that they can excel in, where you can use their personality traits, their abilities to help the child to be successful. And of course, that comes with a bit of a difficult issue here, because most of the time, the persons who are approaching the astrologer is very unlikely to be a 12-year-old. It's much more likely to involve also the parents, and which is why it's important for us to really look at the parameters of what I'm being asked to do before I answer the question. So first of all, let's go and look at the practical realities of using astrology for this purpose. Now, the number one thing is that most kids don't really have a full gamut of choices to choose from, because first of all, it depends on how well the child has done. So there are maybe a sort of few choices that you can decide from. There aren't that many places you can go, and also most of the time it sort of comes down to what kind of subjects or what kind of topics that the child picks from. And most of the time it's things like history, geography, physics, or Chinese language. And can astrology help to sort of determine if somebody is more scientific minded, or perhaps they are a bit more on the artistic side? Well, that one for sure. So which is why it's kind of like a nuanced answer that you can use astrology for that purpose. But let me just sort of explain, look, I mean, I am a trained astrologer, and let's just say if my parents did this process, and if they'd been told that I was going to be quite a decent astrologer, but just so newsflash, astrology wasn't on the list of things that I could have picked when I was 12 or even when I was 16, it just wasn't on the list. In fact, even as an adult, it wasn't kind of on the list either, right? So, I mean, I had to jump through hoops just to go be an astrologer, right? So, but also if you think about it, there are kids who want to do things and they're good at it. They might be destined, to be a caregiver for children. Some people just have the talent for it. Or some people are really, really good at looking after old people, right? So just so you know, there isn't a course for that. And also there are people who may be very good at things like diplomacy and etiquette or being charming to people. Well, I ain't seeing anything like a charm school on that list. So what I'm trying to say here is that the choices that a child has is really limited depending on the circumstances. And what I'm also explaining here is I don't think the limitation is astrology. So astrology can tell if somebody's going to be a fantastic childcare person. What I'm saying is that it's not exactly like a real choice that's available there. Now, let me give you an example of how the parameters can change. Now, in the UK, there is a college called Norland College, where they train young girls to become nannies. So they are the world's best nannies. So they are taught everything from how to drive safely, how to turn away the paparazzi, how to like look after kids and nutrition and basic first aid. So they actually are given fantastic vocational skills to carry out the job that they've got to do. Now, yet another example is that there is also a college somewhere in Germany where you can be a meat professional. So that includes everything from how the animals are being farmed, how they are being slaughtered, how the meat is being sliced and diced, and how it's being packed and how it's being preserved. And that's not an option that's usually available when people are trying to consult me on what course should my child take. And I know that this college in Germany exists because I used to have a boss who used to teach in a college that's exactly like this. So I think what we want to look at is that until the infrastructure changes in a way that truly allows someone to sort of pursue the career that they are really made for, if the choices are really limited to like, whatever's available in this particular college or whatever diploma courses are available, then it's not going to be really, really helpful. Now, I'm going to expand on this further by saying that it's not entirely true that that I didn't get the education that I required to become a good astrologer, because when I did my first degree, it was actually from the NUS, National University of Singapore, and it was in literature. So, and the thing is, why I say it's actually relevant to what I do today is because literature involves learning how to look at text and to pick out things like human themes, human emotions, and to talk about how people relate to the world, which if you think about it is kind of what I do nowadays as an astrologer. It's just that I don't read text in prose, I'm reading symbols, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm also extracting human themes and helping people sort of make sense of what's happening in their world and in the world. So in a way, I did get the education, but what I'm trying to get at is that most people don't always see that correlation between the kind of careers that person is made to do and the kind of top subjects that they are taking in school. Now, another infrastructure importance here was that unlike a lot of people I know, I was very lucky. I had parents who were really cool. So when I wanted to do literature, they were like, go study whatever you want. So it's like, so I picked literature. And, mind you, I come from a country where literature is not typically considered like a great option because it's not economically viable. It's not usually the kind of thing that you would study that would make you like $1 million, and it wouldn't typically guarantee you like a good job in an MNC, right? So and what I'm trying to say here is that the infrastructure has limitations, that although astrology can be fantastic at helping somebody to determine what the right career is, there are other factors that prevent astrology from being truly useful in that regard. Now, another point I want to bring up that is a bit kind of practical is that there are actually very few careers that require somebody to sort of be in it at like 12 years old. Because, and there are a few exceptions, and I will mention a few that practically, yeah, it's true that you do get a major advantage if you start at 12. And they're usually to do with either the arts or sports. Right, so and of course, if you're like a mini Mozart, if you're going to sort of be a virtuoso on the piano or violin, it's kind of useful that you sort of get started when you're like at most between, I don't know what, 5 to 7. It's really useful. There are lots of prodigies who kind of get their diplomas in music by the time they're like 11 or 12 years old, and I get it. Now, for those people, it's a massive advantage to get started early. Now, if you're going to be an Olympic medalist in badminton or golf or whatever it is, it's kind of useful to be like Tiger Woods and get trained from a really, really young age, because by the time you get trained at 16, you're kind of too late to the party, and I completely get that. So then the question here is, can astrology help in that respect? Then can we sort of use it to identify these massive talents? And if I'm being really honest, astrology can't do that. So like, it's not like if I look at the chart of Tiger Woods that I could point at it and say that, well, that guy is going to win like the PGA tournament by the time he's like, a teenager. Like I can't do that. It's like, that's not a realistic outcome from astrology. Now, could I look at Mozart's chart and say that, well, this guy is going to be very talented in the arts? Now, here's the thing, I can. So I will be able to tell if somebody has got artistic ability, but can I tell that they're like Mozart level? No. Sorry, right? So the reality is, can't tell the geniuses. So astrology, not really useful in that regard. But I also want to sort of expand this view by saying that most of the time, and I spend a lot of time sort of studying illustrious people in the world because I'm interested in how people operate, right? And what I've realized is that for most of the people who go into the arts or sports at a very young age, it's a combination of two things. One is exposure, that for whatever reason, within or without schooling, that they've sort of been able to be exposed to that particular sport or that particular arts when they were very young. And most of the time, strangely enough, their success is not driven by the parents, but is driven by the child themselves. It is the child who insists that they want to be a musician, or a child who insists that I'm going to the Olympics and I will train. Because, the work that's required to be successful is like, doesn't really work if your mother forces you to practice piano. So, and the thing is, we know so many people who have had the opportunity or who have had parents who paid and encouraged like their involvement in certain sports or certain music. But these people grow up to like 18, 19 years old and they don't pursue it after that, mainly because they are not interested or they just never really wanted to do it as a profession. So, and most of the time they kind of confess that, I only play the piano because my mom forced me to. So it's like, it's not helpful. I mean, so if most parents are hoping that if astrology can sort of identify a sort of talent and that maybe it would determine if your child was going to be an Olympic medalist or not, I'm not really sure that's really useful. But what could be very useful is actually listening when the child says, I want to be a musician. And we also hear the converse case studies where a child says, I want to be a musician, and the father says, nope, it's not a viable career and you can't, right? So there you got it. You got somebody who actually wants it and who was barred from it. So again, it's kind of like an infrastructure problem rather than whether or not there was a way to determine whether somebody was suited for it or not. But even if they're kind of self-determined, they don't always get what they want. So in that respect, astrology is not that useful either. So if it sounds like I'm not like super enthusiastic about profiling 12-year-olds, it's because I'm not, right? And the reasons are quite simple. Like the first one, controversial reason, is that I can tell that most of the time, like I said, it's not a 12-year-old who is approaching me. It's usually a parent who's approaching me. And what this means is that most of the time, it's understandable that most parents are looking for the best answer, not for anything else other than the fact that they try to find what would like sort of ease the path of the child to find that number one best correct answer. But I also want to suggest that it's not as easy as basically saying that, oh, this one's going to be a cardiologist or this one's going to be a mobile app developer. Not least because like the world's kind of changing in a really alarming way, in the sense that I'm not really sure that we can actually sort of name what careers are going to be big in 10 or 20 years' time for practical reasons, right? And the second reason is that doing this process when somebody is about 12 or 13 actually robs the child of their agency. So it's like, let's just say if an astrologer determines that this person's going to be great as a biochemist or something, and if they get channeled in that direction, it's kind of like having I'm just thinking, what's worse than having a 16-year-old fill in a form and then determines the rest of their life? I can tell you what's worse is to have an astrologer and their parents decide beforehand what kind of career they're going to be in, and the child will one day grow into an adult who never had agency as to what they were going to do with their life, which doesn't frankly make a lot of sense to me. And what I've also realized is that at this age, one of the things that's really, really cool and it's consistent among the people that I've met who are phenomenal in their careers, is that this idea of exploration and experimentation. So what most people are really grateful for is the openness of an infrastructure, and including parents that allow children to sort of like explore as many things as possible, like to try as many sports, try as many musical instruments, or go look at all the various projects that's going around in the world. And at some point, the child lights up. There's something that just grabs their attention and the motivation to be good at it, to go to school and learn everything they can about it. Well, that's unstoppable. So I think it's what makes a bit more sense, really, is just to have more of this exposure and have people go explore. And the third reason why I'm not really crazy about like profiling children at that age is because, quite frankly, the educational system doesn't quite provide for it anyway. I mean, we're going to identify lots of skills that the child won't be able to pursue in a practical sense. So, it's kind of pointless anyway. So right now, I just want to put on a more optimistic view because, I wasn't enthusiastic about what came before, right? So let me tell you what I'm going to suggest is going to make this process so much better. Is we're going to change one parameter, which is the age of the child. So let's just move it up a little bit further, and we start looking at people who are, say, between the age of like maybe 18 to 24, basically kind of like a young adult sort of age. Now, most of the time, these people are in tertiary education. There are a few reasons why it's really useful, because number one, at that age, the parents don't really have so much say as to what they're going to do, right? So if you're 22, for example, you kind of have a lot of say as to like what kind of internships you do, or like what kind of like specific classes that you take at school. Most of the time, daddy and mommy don't really have much say there. So it's a young adult who kind of gets a sense of what you want to do already. And the second reason is that at 18 to 24, this person is old enough to immediately get involved. So let's just say if somebody turns out to really care about like cleaning up sewage systems in third world countries, now that person is actually old enough to go volunteer for a project in Cambodia. That person is old enough to decide that they want to apply for various causes or things like that they can go get involved, whether it's to get a job or to go volunteer for free, right? So they're old enough to do it. And the third reason is that they're kind of at the age where they have to make a decision, So it's like you're kind of already have to be in a career. You have to sort of like make a living or make yourself useful in society. So it's not idle speculation. It's like whatever they decide, they can go do it like, tomorrow. You can do it next week or next month. It's not like if you're dealing with a 12-year-old, we could be trying to speculate about what's going to happen in the world in 10 years' time. And, I may be an astrologer, but no one's going to raise their hand and actually say they can predict what's going to happen in 10 years' time in this climate. So it's idle speculation at best. Now, among this group of people, 18 to 24, I would recommend astrology profiling for three very specific users. Number one is that if you are studying something in school right now or preparing yourself for a career and you already know it's the wrong thing, right? So you already know that you're 1 year into a program and like, okay, shit, right? I could be getting myself into a career for the rest of my life that I don't want to do, right? So that's where profiling is going to be useful, because first of all, it can help you to get some clarity as to, is your gut instinct kind of right? And if you decide that you want to make a change, then what are you looking for? So that profiling can really help in that way. Now, the second group of people are, maybe you're in the right course, but it's not about choosing the course, isn't it? It's about what you're going to do after you graduate. Even if you're in law school, do you go join a property company? Do you join a big firm? Do you join a volunteer welfare organization? There's the world is your oyster, even if you knew what you're going to stick with what you studied with. So astrology profiling can help to determine like how you're going to make yourself useful and to participate in society. And the third group are people who already kind of know what you want to do, but apart from what you study in school, you want to explore what kind of peripheral activities that you want to do, internships that you want to get involved with, people you want to connect with, ideas that you want to share. And you find that the profiling can help you to sort of decide how you're going to productively use your years as a young adult to explore, to experiment, and to kind of get a general direction of where you want to go so that you prepare yourself for the real adulthood where you actually have to go and commit yourself to a profession. All right, so and that's why I wanted to cover this so that we get a clear idea of how astrology profiling can be so much more useful than, like sort of working on a fear-based approach where we are trying to sort of channel little kids to the right place. Right, so if you like more videos like this where we go deep dive into not just astrology as a topic itself, but more about how does it affect the world we live in and the implications and the consequences of how we use astrology and how it can really be helpful apart from being just like a useless pseudoscience. And of course, if you are trying to learn astrology on your own and you found it really difficult because the internet is not like the best place to give you a structured education, you may want to check out the description in the links to find out how you can get started in Self-Astrology Academy, where we've been training people to read astrology charts for more than a decade now. So until then, until the next video, see you guys.